In this video, we'll be building this reclaimed cedar and redwood round table with a trapezoid base. So let's get started on it. You can see here James is cutting down the boards for the top. And each board will be a little different length since we're building a round top. I'll bring you out with me and show you our warehouse and where we're bringing these boards in from. We're just making a table out of these old cedar boards. And this is going to be, this pile here is going to end up being the base. Now we're getting our top laid out, getting ready to glue it up. We'll go through here and get all the boards centered, and then we'll use some pencils to mark where they all go, so when we stand them up to put glue on them, when we lay it back down, we can see where they go easily. We're going to draw our circle on here just to make sure that all of our figuring before was right and our boards are all the right length. And we'll make a 5-foot top. You know, I did these glue ups for years by myself, but sure is nice having an extra set of hands. You really want to get that glue spread really well on the edge of the board. Make sure you get a good solid joint. We use those small 6-inch clamps just to hold the ends of the boards to each other to keep them all flat. It's always a little more of a challenge to get a good flat surface whenever you're using reclaimed lumber like this. Now we're getting started on our base. We're going to build that trapezoid base, and I've built many of these, but I never have made any jigs for it, so I've got to go through this process of laying them out every time. We put a 15-degree angle on the legs and on the ends of the base, and you'll see how we get those put together here in a minute. So here we're just cutting that 15-degree angle on the legs. All right, so these two pieces are going to sit on top of the legs, and we're going to have an angle coming back from the, you can't even see what I'm doing. We're going to have an angle coming back right here. So out at the end where your knees are, it's not sticking down so far. But I've made this mistake in the past, so I always double check it now. You got to lay this out and see how wide this is. So that's 23.5. So this board is 52.5. So we're going to take 52.5 minus 23 and divide by 2. So that angle that comes back here can't go back any more than 14 3/4 inches. If it comes back too far, obviously it gets into where the leg needs to get to that. So the most I'm going to bring it back is 14, which it doesn't need to come back that far. Like 12 would be fine. All right, so I've got my line drawn on there. I've got the 4x4 square to the back. Got a stop block here. And what I did was, I've got my line drawn, so I just played with the angle of the miter saw until I hit my line. We have a big hole back behind the miter saw that goes down and goes into some 4-inch pipe that is hooked up to our dust collection, and that actually does a really good job of especially sucking the dust out of the air as it comes off the miter saw. It draws it back there instead of it wafting out into the shop. I wish I could go back and record this again because you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm basically dividing that leg into thirds and laying out where I'm going to make my cuts on the ends, and you'll see me doing that in a minute, so that'll make a little more sense. But it doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to use these cuts to lay them out on the other piece. So, and you're flipping this board back and forth, so both sides are going to be the same size. Now I would normally use a dado stack to do something like this, but it doesn't reach up as high as a table saw blade. The table saw blade will reach 3 inches above the top, and the dado stack I think like 2 inches. So I'm using the table saw blade, and it still won't reach up high enough. We'll have to notch the top of the tenon that's going to go in this hole so it'll fit. But since we're using the table saw blade, I keep moving the fence over 1/8 of an inch and hogging out that hole until we get it all gone. Now I'm just cleaning that cut up. Now what I'm doing here, since this is rough lumber and we weren't able to mill it to keep that rough look, those all aren't exactly the same size. So I picked out my smallest one and I used it to transfer my lines onto this other piece that's going to get the tenon. And that still didn't work out perfectly. Two of them were fairly loose when I put them together. But we're going to pin them with dowels too, so it works out in the long run. I'm just sneaking up on this cut. I keep moving that over just a little bit until it fits right. Now I'm going to lay them down their sides and use the miter gauge to cut that cheek off. And the bottom of that leg has a 15-degree angle on it. And I just put it straight up against my fence because I know my fence is square to my blade if it's locked down. And with that 15-degree angle up against the fence, then I can bring the miter gauge up to it and lock in that angle. I don't trust the angles on the miter gauge, but you can lock it in against the leg itself, and you know you've got the right angle. I don't get my tenons cut back far enough the first time. I actually go through that, I think, 3 times before I get them back far enough. But right now I'm marking to cut that notch off the top of them that I was talking about, because the blade didn't stick up far enough for the mortises there. So now I'm just cutting that notch off the top of that tenon over on the bandsaw. And then I'll use a handsaw to finish that off. So now I'm just cutting the top of that tenon nut down. Cleaning that cut up a little bit with a file. And after I get all 4 of them cut, I realize it's not back far enough. So I'll do it a couple more times. You can see how it's not sticking through all the way right there. And Molly's going out again. So I go through and cut all of them and come back and try it, and it's still not far enough, and I end up doing it again. You see I have that board clamped to the fence back there, and that's to keep the fence away a little bit, because when it came through the first time, you had that cheek come loose, and this has actually happened to me before, and I should have known better, but I didn't use that board clamped to my fence there, so my fence was just tied up against it, and when that cheek came loose, it got stuck between the blade and the fence, and it came flying back at me. It hurt my hand pretty good. So you put that board clamped to your fence, and that makes a little gap between the fence and the blade when that cheek comes off. You don't have to worry about that. I'm sitting out here on my front porch we're having a beautiful evening. I'm doing this voiceover out of my front porch, so I'm sure you'll hear some night noises and the occasional car going by, but it's just a beautiful night, so I'm hanging out here. Now you're going to see me here in a minute go through each leg and fitting each mortise to each tenon. And like I was saying earlier, these haven't been milled, so they're not all the exact same size. So I'm just trying to fit the best tenon to the best mortise, and I'll go through and mark them. I'll just number them. That way I know which one fits best where. Now James is getting the half laps marked on the top boards, and I'm getting the half laps marked on the bottom pieces. We'll get those half laps cut, and we'll start getting this thing put together. Now to cut those half laps, we'll switch over to the dado stack for that, because it will reach up high enough to hog out our half laps. And I don't know if you saw me doing it, but before I took my blade off, I used a square and squared up that miter gauge to the blade, so now I know it's at 90. Which is what we need to cut these half laps. Now here I'm getting the height set up on our dado stack. And that little gauge is really nice help for that. I've gotten some scraps out of the trash can to check my height, and I'll go back and raise that just a little bit until I dial it in. Now James is going through and scoring where we're going to be cutting our half laps, and that's just so we don't have any tear out as it comes out the back side. He's using a really sharp little knife there to score those. He'll cut both sides of that half lap out, and then hog out the middle. That way you don't have to worry about passing your line as you're coming across. Kind of a cool view. You can see the light coming through as he gets that half lap cut. Gonna have to raise that blade just a hair and take just a little more off of those. It's really a challenge to get stuff like that cut perfectly when you're working with lumber like this. You know, we love working with reclaimed material, and it can be very forgiving because it's reclaimed, but it also presents a lot of challenges as well. All right, we're ready to start putting this base together. Now there, I've got a cup full of sawdust, and we're just using that sawdust to clean up the glue squeeze out. We're going to let those set in clamps overnight, get everything put away in the shop cleaned up, and we'll call it a day. Come back the next morning, we get the top out of clamps and get it cut into a circle. I put some spacer blocks underneath there to raise it up off the table, so as I'm cutting my circle, I don't cut into my top. And I just use a good old paint scraper to clean off the glue squeeze out. I'm going to find my center here. And we'll cut a circle with a router. We'll get this top out of the way, and we'll start getting the base put together. It's just another block that has a 15-degree cut on the bottom of it. And I put that on the back side of the leg just to make sure it's standing up the way it's supposed to be. Now this is that loose one I was talking about. You can see how loose it is. And I'm going to pin it in place with a screw while the glue dries, and then I'll come back with some dowels later. And we'll put those through all 4 legs. Now that top, we're just going to use some long lag screws, lag bolts, to go through that top down to the legs and hold them together. So first I'm going to drill some bigger holes that the head of that nut and a washer will sit down and go down inside the leg so it's flush, so it's not in the way of the top. And then we'll come back with a drill bit and drill down a little further to make a hole for the lag screw to go into. Now I'm just going to get all those lag screws, lag bolts put in with the drill, and then I'll come back with a ratchet and tighten them down by hand the last bit. Now here I'm using the biscuit joiner just to put some slots in this base. I'm putting those slots in there so we can come back with some Z-clips to attach the top to the base later. And those Z-clips allow for the top to expand and contract. You know, as your heat comes on in the winter and your air conditioner comes on in the summer, that top is going to want to move some. So those clips will allow it to do that. I'm going to put a small round over bit on this router, and we'll get the edges softened up a little bit, and then we'll start sanding. I like to do the router work first. That way, anything you need to clean up from it, you can while you're sanding. Now you'll notice that this top is actually a different top than what we ended up putting on the table. And the customer we were building this table for, there was just too much red in this top. So we're just going to make a different base for it, and we'll sell it in the store. Now here I'm putting the dowels in here to hold these legs together solid with the base. And I don't know what I was thinking here. I freehanded the first two when I was drilling the holes for those dowels. And I normally use a simple jig to, first of all, get the holes in the exact same spot on each leg. And also it helps keep your drill bit straight. So it's, so the holes are in the same place on both sides of the leg. And actually I got one of these at kind of a slight angle. And after I did that, I took a few minutes to do this. That drill bit didn't quite reach all the way through with that block on the front, so I get my holes in there, and then I'll take that block off the front and finish that hole. Once again, we'll come back with that cup of sawdust and clean up our glue. This table's basically done. We'll get the sanding done, and off camera we'll get the finish put on it. We use Vermont natural coatings on this table and in a satin finish. Here I'm putting those Z-clips in there to attach the tabletop to the base. And there she is, all done. And you can see that top is different than the one we were working on in the video. Well, hey, please like this video. If you have any questions, put a comment down below. Subscribe to our channel. We're going to continue putting out more videos. Thanks for watching.